Dinosaurs were some of the most powerful builds to ever be introduced to the game, while other factions like the Mammal Guild and Arthropod Guild have come up with some pretty impressive ones. On land, nothing has yet topped the sheer power of the Reptile Guild's greatest achievements.
Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Asian Psycho, aka ToeSniper98. I hope y'all survived No Roll November, especially Thanksgiving and King Hassan weeks, because y'all are about to fail it one way or another once Salem drops. But it drops in December anyway, so I guess you're fine. Have fun trying to explain that to your friendly neighbor at FBI though. But before that, I said I'd make videos on Dino Boy and his thoughts, so here they are. Tyrannosaurus Rex is a 5-star berserker who debuted with the American Singularity, despite the fact that he's Irish and not American, because whoever the fuck wrote that Singularity thought that weaponized Edge and his slut of a drama queen girlfriend who digs piercings and tats yeeting themselves across the fucking eastern seaboard was gonna be a good story. But then again, this is from the same devs who thought turning a white American lolly into a vessel of a Lovecraftian tentacle god and making her look like she's straight out of the degen corner of Comic-Con and then putting her into a class called Forina was a great fucking idea. Okay, I'll stop roasting Abby now. At least until she gets her own video. Giganotosaurus carolini is a hybrid DPS and survival berserker, and if you've used berserkers in a capacity in this game, you'll know that survival and berserker are two words that shouldn't be together in the context of this game. With one exception, of course. I guess Ku got tired of Herc shitting all over him in Carnival Phantasm and took a leaf out of his book for when Maeve summons his ass in America. And now you know why both of them last fucking forever. Tarbosaurus Batar is like Maverick from Siege because he's useful both casually and for quite a few FGO esports memes. And he's a very friendly solo servant, just like how Maverick is a great solo queue operator, minus the PTSD and the torch of course, unless you call Gay Bulge his torch that he uses to drill holes in anything he stabs. Shoutouts to my boy Gregor. Initially his skill set seems suboptimal for a berserker because none of them provide any sort of damage buff, and I know I've made statements in the past where berserkers typically need skills that give them more damage so that they can make the most use out of their Zerk advantage against most classes. Instead they give him defensive quirks and some offensive utility, but they're what give him the survivability that he's known for, just like his other classes. His first skill is his offensive utility. It reduces all enemies' attack and crit chance by 20 and 50% respectively for 3 turns. This is a far more powerful skill than you might give it credit for. 20% attack debuff is good, but the 50% crit chance reduction is the real kicker because at this potency, it basically renders all enemies unable to crit unless you're unfortunate enough to be fighting against Werewolf, Jaguar, or Goblin Assassins, and they still land their 10% crits anyway. See my previous video on hidden tech and mechanics in FGO if you have no idea what the fuck I just talked about. The combination of these two debuffs means that both aspects of enemy damage output get oofed. Because of the way FGO is set up with enemies, especially bosses, having 6 or even 7-digit HP numbers while your servants will never break 5, your servants' health pools are at a premium. And while hard defense skills are still preferable for avoiding damage, eventually you will take damage, and unless you're a Coup-Face, Rice Man, or Melty Scissor Legs, most hard defense skills don't last for 3 turns or longer. So the next best option is to have a skill that reduces enemy damage output, and Mini-Coup does that phenomenally. Incidentally, Mini-Coup is also the name Maeve gave Coup Alter's other gay bulge. What do you mean it's a talking plushie doll? With this skill active, your whole team takes way less damage since the debuffs are AoE, which then means that your team has more HP to work with overall going into the later rounds or just survive longer period. This also includes your not-so-friendly neighborhood emo kid who hangs out behind your school's bathroom lifting 70-pounders and cutting his wrists at the same time. For all that fucking Chad muscle he's got, remember that he still has less health than some 4-star servants. Emo jokes aside, this is a roundabout way of saying that Coup Alter's first skill is a rather rare case of a debuff skill that's universally useful and doesn't require absolutely precise timing on specific turns, though a bit of careful timing and situational awareness obviously can still maximize its usefulness. The one major downside to this skill is the fact that it's a debuff, so enemies with high magic resist can still ward against it. Be mindful of that whenever you throw Dino Boy against some useless or not so useless goddesses or something. Saurophaganax Maximus' second skill is PFA, which you all know and love, but it's not as strong as the one you know and love, only giving Coup Alter 2 evades instead of the usual 3. Admittedly, it would be kind of broken if you had access to 3-hit PFA, but putting DW and balance together in the same sentence is a fucking meme in and of itself. See that defense buff?
Forget about it!
Dino Boy barely has 12k HP, and he's a berserker, so unless he's got PFA active or you double stack waiver defense buffs on his ass, his own defense buff ain't gonna do shit to stop him from getting melted as fast as the M4 melts in Modern Warfare. Maybe in Omega Esports scenarios, the 14% defense buff could save Coolter's ass, but that's highly unlikely. So the more important part about the skill is that he can take 2 hits for free every 5 turns, and his 2 evade stacks last forever until they're hit, meaning that in a team, if you're lucky enough or you have taunters to draw aggro, you can use PFA back to back once it comes back off cooldown. Just don't be an idiot and pop PFA while you still have an evade stack active. It ain't gonna refresh that shit, and the game's just gonna laugh at your dumb ass. And lastly, Carnotaurus Sastre's third skill is a straightforward guts. 1 revive for 5 turns, comes back every 7 turns. It's simple, but like his OG version, it's Dino Boy's second layer of defense that not only serves as his lifeline in case enemies take down his PFA quickly, but also serves as a valuable defense against insta-kills. This is especially important for him because he's got a whopping 52% death rate from insta-kills, and the higher it is, the worse it is for you, which means that he's very prone to anyone who has insta-kill as part of their kit, so don't expect him to be surviving any gay bulges, or thigh kisses, or bring me thy heads anytime soon, unless he has guts up, of course. Oddly enough, his passives give him more self-buffs than the rest of his skills combined. Man Enhancement EX gives him 6% extra buster performance because DW loves their lore too much to just say that he only has Man Enhancement C, which, either way, is always nice for someone with a full Zerk deck like him. And Divinity C gives him an extra 150 damage per hit, which is mostly irrelevant unless you're beating up some crabs during the summer in the middle of a fucking rainstorm. But only having passives giving him some buffs obviously isn't enough, and this is where his MP comes in. Kurid Coinhen is a single target buster MP that gives Coolter the damage he needs as a Berserker through its overcharge, which casts a 1-turn attack and defense buff on him from 30 to 70%. Let's go big brain mode here a little bit and discuss why this kind of a kit is so strong on Tyrannotitan Chibutensis, starting with the buff itself. It's a 30% buff. An offensive 30% buff of any kind is rather rare in Fate Grand Order, and while you might not think so with how many times you pick a support waiver off your friends list, the majority of offensive buffs in this game only scale from 10 to 20%, maybe a little bit more depending on the server, but usually not up to 30%. And then we have these motherfuckers with 45 or 50%, and then Shana with 70%. Not that it helps her that much. The point is that 30% is a thick attack buff all on its own, but now let's consider its overcharge nature because with that in mind, it scales up to a hilarious 70%. Now granted, you'll almost never hit OC5 for that anyway, so the more relevant application is that in the event that you have multiple MPs stacked up, Cursed Bitcoins is one of the best anchor MPs in the game because it gets such a colossal benefit from extra overcharge levels. Another benefit of having this sort of buff as an MP overcharge state is the fact that you will always get it as long as weird shit like buff blocks aren't going on. What I mean by this is that most servants have their buffs as skills that you need to manually activate, so if you're like me who forgets shit all the time like a fucking boomer, you might forget to pop a skill before you use an MP. Not the case with Indominus Rex, who, despite the fact that I've been calling him a fucking dinosaur all video long, is a goddamn zoomer instead, as you can tell by the fucking AirPods he tattooed on his own chest like a true millennial Chad. Every time you use his MP, he pops that buff like he pops his mollies, which in his case are Maeve's ass cheeks, so you know for a fact that every time he goes full Metal Alchemist on someone, he's already juiced the fuck up. He's also got a really high attack stat at 12,805, beaten out only by Burnt French Toast and Giantess Fetish. In fact, he's the LeBron James of Berserker attack values, and remember that he's got a Berserker deck, so all things considered, despite essentially only having one actual attack buff, Maeve's boy toy has extremely high and consistent damage, even among Berserkers. One tangent that I should cover before we move on is the MP's defense buff. I've been going on about the attack buff for all this time, but the 30% defense buff is also important for your own clever girl. Or clever boy in this case, I guess. Like I've implied before, ideally you shouldn't have Coolter be taking any damage, or at least have PFA cover him. But you don't always get to fight in ideal circumstances, and so this 30% defense buff can let Coolter maybe take an extra hit that he wasn't supposed to. Now add the 14% defense buff that I said was useless before, and a 44% defense buff for one turn can definitely save Coolter in a pinch if you have his MP available. His consistently high DPS frees up his skill set to concentrate on other things, which is why his skills don't have more attack buffs, but instead have defensive buffs and utility, and together this gives Albertosaurus Sarcophagus top-tier damage and far above average survivability for Berserkers. He's like Herc, except he's a 5-star and trade survivability for more damage! What this means for you is that he's very flexible and self-sufficient. You can use him just about anywhere from farming to story fights to challenge quests, as long as tentacle-powered eldritch lollies aren't involved, and he can get the job done, oftentimes without needing help from anyone else. In fact, his kit allows him to solo to a surprising degree, as I've mentioned at the beginning of this video, because when he is solo, his damage output gets so big that Disney's gonna want to make the next Star Wars movie about him with all his Buster Brave chains and whatnot. And while he's obviously no Herc, his survivability is still good enough to the point where people have used him to solo challenge quests or otherwise meme them. Since he is self-sufficient, you don't need to worry as much about what kinds of teammates to give him, but one of his few weaknesses is the fact that since he is still a Berserker with pitiful health and his PFA isn't as strong as what you're used to with Vanilla Ku, he can be prone to getting melted if he gets bad RNG and gets targeted a lot, so given defensive buffers or healers to patch him up whenever he does get bopped. And since I'm doing Maeve's video at the same time, you can play Darling in the Frank Simulator if you have both of them, and give Ku Alter a ludicrous 40% attack buff for 3 turns. Add Waver for his skills on top of that, and suddenly Hero Alter is literally doing double damage whenever he uses MP. Maybe 02 really is best girl in that anime, I don't know. Stick to damage or defensive CEs for Craft Essence options on Daspletosaurus Taurosis. While his damage output is already solid enough without any external help, this means that anything more you do to juice his attack up even more will make him nuke bitches that much harder, which is something Maeve's a fan of, I'm sure. You can also give him Volumen as a defensive CE, since you can have both Invul and Evade stacks active at the same time, and enemy attacks take off the Invuls first, which means that Ku Alter can keep his own Evade stack safe, but if you're looking to throw him into one of Michael Vick's challenge quests or story battles, giving it an offensive CE is the far better option. So to wrap up, Ceratosaurus Nasicornis is a great DPS Berserker with solid defensive options, and enough power to mow through the vast majority of content in this game, with the exception of endgame stuff like challenge quests and story fights, and even then he can give those a good run for their money under the right circumstances. Even if you're not a Ku fanboy because you're a whale on Discord or Facebook or on Alter who hates the fact that plebs love using Vanilla Ku, Ku Alter is both fun and easy to use, which is perfect for you whales anyway, so he's absolutely worth at least some of your quartz in story gacha if you're actually degenerate enough to roll that shit. Or at the very least whenever his raid ups come along. If he fucking had any! And that's all you need to know about you strip to Thanks for watching, y'all. Make sure to watch Thought Queen's video right after this, and until next time, deuces.